But put simply, the aim is really to mobilize global action to tackle the climate change and keep track of progress that's been made by individual countries.
You are listening to CEO Perspectives, a podcast by the Conference Board.
Welcome to this episode of CEO Perspectives, a signature series by the Conference Board. CEO Perspectives are conversations that take an objective, nonpartisan look at a range of subjects that matter most to business leaders. I'm Steve Odland from the Conference Board and the host of this series. In today's conversation, we're going to get an update on COP28, which is ongoing. What is it? Why is it important? And what are the most likely outcomes from this year's meeting? Joining me today is Lori Esposito Murray, the president of the Committee for Economic Development of the Conference Board. Lori, welcome.
Thank you, Steve, and very happy to be here to have this very important discussion with you.
Well, Lori, you were there. You were in Dubai at the COP meeting, and you've just come back, and we want to hear about your experience. But just before we do that, can you just give us a little background? What is COP, and why is it important? When did it start, and so forth?
So COP, Steve, refers to, it's the United Nations Annual Conference on Climate Change. It's its 28th meeting. It happens yearly for the most part. And this year it's in Dubai. The formal name of the meeting is the Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So that's the formal name. But put simply, the aim is really to mobilize global action to tackle the climate change and keep track of progress that's been made by individual countries. And that's a very important aspect this year at COP. It started in 1995. The first COP was in Berlin. Some of the major achievements have been the Kyoto Agreement of 1997, and of course, the Paris Accord of 2016. And now the main focus, as had mentioned, is really mobilizing global action to implement the Paris Accord's goals.
So it's COP is the Conference of Parties, and this is all part of the United Nations. This is COP 28, which means that it's the 28th time that This has happened, generally annually. That's what that means. I think people have probably been reading the headline COP 28 and just wondering, what the heck does that mean? So it's just really pretty simple on that. But the goals really have been pretty consistent, Lori, over the years, haven't they? From the start in the 90s till now.
Right. They have been, Steve, and it is focused on what is seen and believed to be by the United Nations the most important global issue facing our entire global community, which is climate change, its impact. I should mention that there were 198 parties to the UN United Nations Framework Conventions that attend COP. They come with their delegations. There are about 70,000 attendees there. The delegations are complemented by leaders in business organizations, civil societies, organizations are there. It is really quite an event.
Yeah, it sounds like you could actually reduce a lot of carbon if you didn't do the meeting. 70,000 people and all the travel and all the hot air that comes out of it. But it is an important subject, which is how do you tackle climate change and what impact that humankind is having on climate change, right? I mean, that's really the primary focus.
Right. And it's the largest annual meeting convened by the United Nations. It trumps the General Assembly meetings in New York.
Just out of curiosity, how did they decide where to have it? This year it was in Dubai.
So it rotates, Steve, among the 5 regions, the United Nations 5 regions. And what might be a little confusing is last year was in Egypt, this year is in the UAE. That sounds both like the Middle East, but Egypt was representing Africa, and each region decides where specifically it would be held within their region, and there are proposals set forth as this year with the UAE.
Some people have kind of raised the subject, well, a lot of this is about getting rid of fossil fuels, and yet you have this in the Middle East, which is the primary producer of fossil fuels. Isn't that just slightly wrong? What's your view on that?
Well, that is a really controversial aspect of this year's COP28 and being held in the UAE, one of the major oil producing petrochemical countries in the world, and it's being chaired by Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, who is the head of the national oil company in the UAE. Environmentalist Al Gore didn't attend because he criticized the fact that it was taking place in the UAE, and it was being the president of COP was the head of the national oil company. But Steve, my personal view on this, as well as, and it's shared by a number of delegations attending, it's widely shared, that you can't move forward in this effort to combat climate control unless you actually work with the producers of fossil fuels, you work with the countries that are invested in that production. You've got to work hand in hand. You've got to work collaboratively. And what's really significant about the UAE actually leading this effort in terms of this year's COP is actually they have been very much forward-leaning on the transition in terms of climate issues and energy, and the transition to green energy. So it's a country that, one, number of things are really important as far as climate challenges. They are a shoreline country. They are dealing with extensive heat in their country as well as in the region. There's been very clear recognition by the UAE that they need to be forward-looking and strategic thinkers. And they've been investing heavily in decarbonization and recognize the need that fossil fuels are a limited resource and that they need to transition their economy. If they are going to continue to prosper in the global economy.
Yeah, I know that, from an activist perspective, they go after oil companies or fossil fuel producers, and their point of view is shut them down. But literally, we would be back in the Stone Age if that happened. And so I think your point is really important, which is there needs to be a transition here, an orderly, planned transition from fossil fuel use in the development of energy and transportation to the alternatives. And I think that's what this was all about, is how do you affect this orderly transition?
Well, obviously the companies and the countries that have most to lose if the transition isn't orderly, because fossil fuels are a limited resource, are obviously the countries and the companies heavily invested in our current forms of energy, really have to be leaders. If they are forward thinkers and they recognize what's happening, not only in terms of climate, which is, we have real existential problems there, but in terms of the economy, they need to be leaders in terms of transitions, and they have the resources to invest. And you're seeing that in the UAE. I mean, they started these investments actually under Dr. Al-Jaber in 2006. It's something that UAE has recognized early in this trajectory of the problems with climate change and the need for an energy transition.
Okay, so you were in the meetings. So and I don't know how much of it is private versus public, but share with us what you can about what you heard, what was discussed, what's new in what everybody's committing to do.
So I was attending the business and philanthropy meetings, and they were 2 days. And as I said, the first 2 days are when the national leaders come in, and King Charles's speech got a lot of coverage. The president of COP28's speech, Dr. Al-Jaber, got a lot of coverage. That's when the national leaders come in, and it's also the first 2 days they held these business and philanthropy meetings. And so those were the meetings that I was in. And what's interesting, Steve, is that it has taken, this is the 28th COP, it has taken a very long time for the countries that participate, obviously, in the UN framework meetings, in these COP meetings, to recognize the need to include business in these decisions going forward on how to tackle, how to set goals for emissions, how to tackle the climate challenge. And it's taken a long time, but they're actually finally getting there. And this business and philanthropy meetings were part of that. There were some really interesting discussions. One of the ones that I found most interesting is the fact that we are all very excited about the technology innovations that are happening in Gen AI and quantum computing. These are very, very heavily energy sourced technologies going forward, and what are the leading tech companies doing in terms of trying to make sure that they are staying on a pathway towards net zero. And we heard from Brad Smith, who is part of the conference board, as from Microsoft, as well as from Amazon. Ron O'Hanley, who is a former TCB Board of Trustee member, was actually the moderator of that session. So, a number of the business leaders that are very familiar with that the conference board works with and are very familiar to all of us were participating in these sessions. And I thought that was one of the most interesting ones. They're talking about carbon markets, the importance of carbon markets, also a critical issue, and how to establish those so that they're effective and working to achieve the goals. So really interesting series of 2 days of meetings.
Right, Ron O'Hanley, the CEO of State Street, which is one of the largest investors in the world. So important player in all this. So it sounds like you had a lot of discussion about the current status. Now, the goals were to limit the average increase in global temperatures to 2 degrees centigrade, and we're starting to read that in fact is not something that's going to be possible, since we are already at that level. Did you talk about that in these meetings?
Well, actually, that is pretty much a significant part of not only what has happened in terms of COP28, but in terms of what is going to happen over the next. The meetings go on for this week and next, and that's when the state parties get together and actually try and figure out the pathway ahead and what the goals are. And it started, and one of the most significant things about this COP this year was the fact that they have done an assessment of what are where do we stand since the Paris Agreement, the Paris Accord? Where do we stand in terms of what progress we have made? And this it's really laying out those benchmarks of what has been accomplished, an important part of this COP. And what's interesting here is that the UN reported from that data that they believe we're already at 1.4 degrees. So just to give a little background on that, the Paris Agreement laid out an increase in 2 degrees centigrade from the pre-industrial period in terms of temperature of the globe. And then in a subsequent COP in 2021, COP21, the goal was laid out to actually aim for 1.5 degrees centigrade increase in global temperatures. Well, the UN reported just prior to this COP that they believe that we've already hit 1.4 degrees centigrade, which to that goal of 1.5. And so that would be, in order to stay with the 1.5 goal, you would have to be looking at greenhouse gas emissions being cut by 43% by 2030 compared to 2019 levels, which is a really significant and dramatic cut. So it started with basically that bad news about where we are and where we need to go to reach the 1.5 degrees centigrade. But remember that the Paris Agreement has the increase of 2 degrees centigrade. So that has really been the main focus of the launch of the meeting in terms of what the goals are going to be, how are we going to get there, how are we going to do some really significant decreases in emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and how do you achieve it and what's needed. And the commitment by the UAE in terms of hosting COP was that they recognize the need to move out on this quickly, and wanted really tangible agreements and goals set by the end of this COP.
We're talking about this COP28 meetings that are happening in Dubai. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
What does the future of work mean for your employees? How will your company navigate ESG? Will there be a global recession? At the Conference Board, our experts translate the latest research and economic analysis into insights and real-time problem solving for your organization. Membership at the Conference Board provides your team with an assortment of knowledge, from economics, marketing and communications, ESG, public policy, and human capital. As a member, you'll have access to our center experts, member-exclusive events, data and benchmarking tools, and peer sharing that will help you understand the present and shape the future. Consider becoming a Conference Board member today by visiting www.conference-board.org.
Welcome back to CEO Perspectives. I'm your host, Steve Odland from the Conference Board, and I'm joined today by Dr. Lori Esposito Murray, the president of the Committee for Economic Development of the Conference Board. Okay, so Lori, we were talking right before the break about this 2-degree goal and the fact that we're probably already 1.5 degrees there. So what does that really mean? Does that mean that we just are not going to, by 2050, we're just not going to be able to stay within that 2-degree goal that was set a few years back?
Well, the goal is still to stay within that 2-degree goal, and it really is going to take a significant commitment. And the whole point of COP28 and the leadership of the UAE in terms of hosting this was to really come out of the box strong in terms of trying to start setting out important pathways, important commitments to stay within the Paris Climate Agreement Accord.
Yeah. Okay. So now then the question is, what are we going to do about it? Right. So, we've been talking about reducing carbon emissions, and, that clearly that's still part of it. But several announcements have been made already as it relates to that and nuclear energy. Why don't you just tick off, what they have said so far?
Yeah, and it's been very interesting in terms of leadership, and it's leadership that's being shared among the key principal nations, the key principal emitters. So the first and foremost was the loss damage fund, and that was an issue that really was outstanding from COP27. It was very controversial in COP27. And what's the loss damage fund? It's really helping those countries that have not been involved in the emissions of greenhouse gases, but have been suffering the consequences. And so a loss damage fund was set up, and the first announcement out of the box by the president of COP28 was that the UAE itself would contribute $100 million to the loss damage fund and loss and damage fund, and that $70 million was pledged. The U.S. is in that mix, and we pledged our climate envoy, John Kerry, former Senator Kerry, pledged $17.5 million on behalf of the U.S. So the goal is $700 million pledged, and to actually fulfill that goal, which was part of the controversy coming out of Egypt.
So that's the damage fund that's been announced. There's also some announcement on the use of nuclear energy.
Yeah, I do want to mention first, too, that climate financing is a key piece of this. And they also announced a $250 billion fund for climate financing, of which the UAE committed $30 billion in announcing that fund. So that's also very important, because that's there to fund this transition to clean energy, to help expedite it. But the nuclear agreement was also one of the first out of the box. And there you have the United States and 21 other countries pledged to, on the Saturday, pledged that they would triple their nuclear energy capacity by 2050. Wow. Pretty significant, considering that the whole, as you know, particularly in the U.S., the nuclear energy component has not been growing, has been decreasing, and over the years. And this was a commitment by the U.S. and 21 other countries that they're going to triple nuclear energy capacity by 2050, obviously focusing on the new technologies that are out there in terms of nuclear energy.
Well, this has been a conundrum, because the activists have, of course, wanted to get rid of fossil fuels in use in electricity production. At the same time, they protested the use of nuclear in electricity production. At the same time, they're trying to convert the entire transportation fleet for, automobiles, trains, planes, to electric. And so that equation doesn't work unless you relinquish the constraints on nuclear, of course, because nuclear is carbon free, and it provides that stable base of power that renewables, which are episodic, need in order to give us a reliable system. Otherwise, sun goes down, and you've got so much battery storage, but you can't guarantee day to day that you've got the electricity we need to run the country. So nuclear becomes pretty important. But how do the activists then react to that? I guess, they want renewables. Everybody wants wind and sun. Got it. But wind and sun can't get there. So are they kind of giving in on nuclear and saying, yeah, this is we were wrong and we absolutely need nuclear? What did you hear?
Well, there's obviously a lot of controversy. This is a piece of it, but I think there's a recognition, to the points that you just made as to how do you get to your 2050 goal, and a recognition of the need and the urgency in terms of having to transition to clean energy, plus the demands that part of the answers to that equation is clean electricity. So the demands that's going to place on clean electricity, and the fact that there's new technology that is supposed to be safer, much more manageable and safer. And so a combination of all those is what led to this agreement. And 22 countries were willing to step up and make that commitment and actually highlight and profile the importance of nuclear energy in this.
Well, it sounds like we're making good progress there, because it is the primary requirement, and the conference board has written on this that we have to adopt nuclear in order to achieve both the goals of a reliable energy system as well as the need to get to a carbon-free environment. So that's a big deal. Yeah, there are also other technologies that you talked about, from a funding standpoint, and primary in that is battery technology, right? I don't know if they got to that point or discussed that in detail, but the batteries have required lithium, of course, and rare earth minerals that are controlled by a relative few nations. The supplies are limited, and of course the mining of that is ecologically damaging as well. So you've got a conundrum there. But there are some new technologies using sodium-based batteries and others that use commonly available minerals and supplies that hold some degree of promise. Any further discussion on that?
Well, that's a key part, that especially the R&D piece of this, in terms of funding the startups and also funding companies that beyond the startup level that have some very viable alternatives, to make sure that they are alternatives and then how to scale them up. That's all part of the climate financing, and a significant part of it, trying to find these alternative technologies to solve these problems and then to scale them up.
Yeah. Any other announcements or agreements that you see coming?
Well, I was going to say there was one other announcement that has been made, which is on methane, where you had some 50 oil and gas companies pledging to shore up basically to clean up, shore up their leaky methane systems by 2030. This is really significant. As you know, Steve, methane's contribution to global warming is about 80 times that of CO2. Now, CO2, carbon dioxide, is 3/4 of the global warming problem. It lasts thousands of years, but actually tackling this methane problem, given its much higher impact on global warming, even though it's a shorter-lived greenhouse gas, much shorter lifetime, about a decade. Greenhouse gas, but cleaning it up is critical, and is a fast and rapid way of trying to address the increase in temperatures. So this was really significant, and I would say overdue. And basically, that commitment happening, I think, is pretty fundamental in terms of helping to keep us on track. If that's possible, for at least a 2-degree centigrade increase in global temperatures.
And late night communities have a field day with this methane discussion, because a lot of it is due to livestock issuance, and so therefore they go, well, what are you going to do? So there is the move to less livestock consumption and raising, but there are new things that are happening. For example, there are additives that you can put into live food, the feed for livestock, that actually significantly cuts the methane output and hurt the livestock, doesn't have any residual impact, for the food chain. But these are things that hadn't been really thought about before. But when you really do get into the issue, there are things we can do.
Yeah, and representatives of those sectors are in Dubai, and they're all part of this discussion and part of the methane discussion. And so if you're looking for the value of these 28 COP meetings and are they important, it really is, I think, in terms of a bringing together collaboratively all of the aspects and all of the stakeholders in these issues who can actually play a role in finding solutions is significant.
Well, we've been debating what the value of the United Nations is, off and on. One is, of course, that one objective we had when it was formed was world peace. But I think tackling these issues that affect the globe are, really pretty high up on the priority list. And it seems like this is one that nations have come together on, and the convening by the United Nations with COP, with COP28 and the 27 before that, and the next 27 that are going to happen are really important, because you do need agreement. Otherwise, all you do is you push the cost to some nations and you let some nations skate. And it really takes every nation, especially the largest polluters, to deal with this. China and India have kind of risen to the top of that list. Any specific conversation with those countries?
What's really important here is in terms of this particular COP is what is being called, I said they were measuring where we are and what each country is doing with their national programs. And that's the global stock take. And so to use their official name for that effort. And that's why COP28 is significant. So you're looking at every nation's plan and looking at it as a whole and deciding what needs to be done and who needs to do what. And obviously, China and India are absolutely key in this climate transition. There was progress made, as you know, in San Francisco at the bilaterals between President Biden and Xi Jinping as far as discussing working collaboratively on climate agreements coming into this meeting. In terms of where we're looking to see when we come out, or the commitments that China and India make, they have a longer timeline than the U.S. to reach net zero. Our goal is 2050. They're a little bit farther out, but that is something to really keep an eye on in terms of how we come out of this as major emitters. What are the commitments they're making, and what type of solutions are we coming up with in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and the future of fossil fuels, the future of coal as a source of energy, which China is heavily invested in. So all really important issues over the next several days and week.
Okay, and any last thoughts before we close?
Well, I would say that one of the major takeaways on my part in terms of the significance of COP28 and the climate issue and dealing with this global challenge, the importance of business as a part of the solution. And the frustration, but relief that that's finally being recognized as significant. And so with all the criticism about the UAE actually leading this, I think there really is a bright light here in terms of COP recognizing, the COP process recognizing that business is an important part of the solution, that the companies and the countries that are heavily invested in fossil fuels need to be part of the solution. Some of them are very well aware of the fact, both companies and countries, that they are the biggest stakeholders in the solution, that they need to have a solution because they either have to be ahead of the transition or they're going to see their own legacies fail going forward. So the importance of really recognizing the role of business, which obviously at the Committee for Economic Development, CED, and the Conference Board, we have a particular eye on that piece, and it's important to see that this very important process on climate change is recognizing that. The other piece of it too is, in terms of why is COP significant and the criticism of the expense of doing these large 70,000 people meetings versus solving them some other way that isn't so comprehensive, is that I really do think I'm very optimistic about the process and the progress, in the sense that none of these accords are binding agreements. And we have been able to move as a global community to raising the importance of this issue on a very high level, to have leaders across the globe involved with leaders in the private sector and the civil sector, all working together to set benchmarks and goals without any agreements that are binding accords, and to be working on this collaboratively to try and deal with this real challenge with consequences if we don't deal with it that are very severe. So I thought it was very encouraging to see how the momentum has really built as far as a collaborative effort to deal with this global challenge, while we're watching two wars, one in Europe, Israel at war with Hamas, in the Middle East. It really was a counterpoint of global collaboration on a very significant challenge.
Dr. Lori Esposito Murray, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Steve.
And thanks to all of you for listening into CEO Perspectives. Every week, I'll be joined by a prominent thought leader to provide insights on the issues of our time. We'll cover the leading topics in geopolitics, economics, public policy, ESG, and a whole bunch more. Please share CEO Perspectives with your colleagues, your friends, your family, with anybody who cares at all about our planet. I'm Steve Odland, and this series has been brought to you by the Conference Board.
You have been listening to CEO Perspectives, a podcast by the Conference Board.